Hi, everyone. Welcome to Shonda J, your BCBA YouTube channel. Our mission is to explore the future of applied behavior analysis, shifting away from ableist practices towards interdependence, stronger caregiver guidance, and elevated adult services.
You're on mute now.
Okay. All right. Sorry, you guys had a little tech issue on my end. No worries, but we're back in business. Like I mentioned, everybody, this is as much as I thought I had it figured out, apparently I didn't. But it is all right. The show keeps going. Everybody, this is Shonda J, your BCBA. As you know, we focus on adult services, really honing in on ableism practices, focusing on caregiver guidance, and not focusing specifically on independence, but focusing on interdependence. And the reason why I say interdependence, because when it comes to the individuals we support, we all need each other to help the individuals succeed and be successful. So, who I have today is I'm honored to sit down with distinguished leaders in behavior analysis, in psychology, and ethics. They are currently collaborating on upcoming definitive industry resource. It's called Comprehensive Behavior Analytic Supervision. This resource is going to be a textbook that provides BCBAs a framework on how to provide supervision. Now, it's not like your typical supervision resources that are out there. This resource will really help break the mold and honing down on specific skills that a practitioner needs. So when they go out in the field, they have the knowledge, the discernment, and the competence to know how to tackle not just the basic fundamentals of being a BCBA, but also the other logistics behind between ethics and work-life balance and things of that nature. Who we have with us today are our guests, Joseph. I'm probably gonna mispronounce your name, but bear with me. Correct me if I'm wrong. Joseph Catilli. Did I
Cautilly.
say that right?
Cautilly.
Catilli. All right. PhD, an internationally recognized speaker, educator, and author dedicated to advancing compassionate, ethical behavior practices in clinical decision making. And then we also have Michael Weinberg, PhD, BCBAD, a leader in professional development in adult services, specializing in clinical case formalization, competency, and strengthening supervision frameworks. So today's big question I have for everyone here that's listening today, as someone passionate about dismantling ableism practices, promoting asset and honoring dignity across the lifespan, I am thrilled to dive into today's conversation. We are tackling the ultimate question for the future of our field. How do we develop behavior analysts who are not only technically competent, but ethically grounded, clinically prepared, and fiercely committed to honoring the voices of the individuals we serve? So, hello, gentlemen. So glad that you're joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you. It's an honor to be with you.
Same. Thank
Yes,
you.
yes.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having us.
Yes, and I'm really thankful that you guys decided to use my platform, because one thing about my platform, yes, I'm targeting BCBAs, but the real audience is targeting those individuals that are in college right now, because that's the future BCBAs, those RBTs that are in school getting those hours, those behavior techs, even those people that just decided out of nowhere, you know what, I want to shift from what I'm doing and I want to be a BCBA, and kind of giving them the foundational tools and knowledge. So when they're out there in the field, they have some type of resource that they can refer to when it comes to adult services. Because as of right now, yes, we have adult services and statistics show that the field is growing, but as much as the field is growing, there are not abundance of resource aligned with the field growing. So I'm trying to plant the seed to target that particular audience. So when they do get in the field or they have any questions or concerns, they can always refer back to Shonda J, your BCBA, and kind of gain a clearer understanding of how to support the adult population based on those fundamental principles I brought up before, focusing on ableism, focusing on caregiver guidance, and then also focusing on interdependence. So with that being said, one thing you brought up to me, Joseph, is restorative ABA supervision, healing and rational accountability. Traditional supervision models often emphasize strict hierarchy, right? They focus on compliance, metric driven performance, right? How can behavior analytics supervisors define and operationalize a restorative supervision framework that prioritizes rational accountability, repair over punishment, and the psychological safety of both the supervisor and the supervisee?
So we were not the first behavior analysts that have referred to um, the supervisor as a healer. And I don't mean as a general healer, but as a healer in the workplace environment. And the field suffers from a lot of things like burnout, compassion fatigue, decision fatigue, which are very harmful. And for supervisors themselves, a lot of them begin to experience, because they only have feedback fatigue. I've told them a million times. Mike and I spent a lot of time on developing uh, a behavior analysis model of development as a supervisee becomes more, starting with the this was work that was done on children by Sid Bijou, and we kind of used it as a metaphor. He talked about a sensory stage, an early verbal stage, a verbal stage, and then an advanced verbal stage. So we have 4 different stages, and we saw that as the core of supervisee development. And then this idea that people can drift off of the core. And then when they drift off the core, then they need this concept of restorative supervision. But I don't just mean drift off the core in the sense of that they drift off the core, that they're not doing a particular intervention. I mean it in a broader sense. If you go back to Posford and Barman in '83, if you look at um, Strassel and Jacobson, '87, you'll see both of them talked about problems with the supervisee of anxiety, problems with the supervisee of overreactivity. And the nice thing about Strassel and Jacobson's, their model was built for residential kind of work, and how you could do a functional assessment of those problem behaviors and develop interventions based on that functional assessment. Now, a lot of what they did was systematic desensitization. A lot of what they did was reducing the punishment in the environment for those variables. And they're things that we looked at in our restorative supervision model. How do you bring the guy back that it's deviated into this compassionless care, just going to work every day, kind of burn out? How do you re-excite him about their job? How do you get them to find passion in what they do and to reconnect with the people that they're serving, so that they're serving them in a way that not just builds skills and works towards a quality of life improvement, but has them where they're empathic and caring about the clients they work with the supervisee being caring, not just to the clients, but also to the consultees that they work with. We find that, for example, that a lot of BCBAs assume the teacher should do it. And that's kind of a disrespect to the teacher's learning history. They may have tried something similar and it's created problems for them. They may be in an environment that's highly punishing for them. And their worry is, if they do this, put more focus on this one child, the whole classroom's going to fall apart. And we talk a little bit about how to do a functional analysis with respect to history of their background, so you get an understanding of where they're coming from. Take a more molar view to these kinds of things, and that's really where I think we were starting with supervision itself, um, we see in restorative supervision this idea that if you look a lot about at the literature, right, things like burnout in meta-analytic studies come up as very equivalent to depression, right? And it's almost
Mm.
like a job depression. The person is depressed about their job. They've lost enthusiasm, they've lost excitement. And so that became core of the foundation. There's lots of behavioral models of depression. Jonathan Cantor and I once wrote an article on behavioral models of depression. It appeared in the old Behavior Analyst Today many years ago. But we wrote this article on depression, and a functional analysis of depression, 5 factors and 2 possible factors, where we looked at history effects, we looked at different reinforcement value and those kinds of things for depressed behavior, looked at a lot of the escape behavior and said, how is it that we can help people become undepressed? And now we apply that to restorative supervision. But in our model, we also like to prevent burnout. And we drew a little bit on a developmental model. Bob Kohlenberg had a developmental model from a behavior analytic perspective of how the self develops, right? And really, the goal of good supervision is to get you to develop a sense of self that I am a behavior analyst. Not that you're feeling like you have imposter syndrome, not that you're feeling like you just passed the test. How do you really develop that I statements? And he talks about the development of self from a child perspective and talks about the importance of reinforcement on verbal statements the child makes, both tax and mans, that are self-statements, where the baby starts with just what they say, and then it gets a little expanded, baby want, and then maybe it becomes I want later. And we talk about I want, I need, I see, I hear, and how that then leads to a stable sense of self. This for us creates this idea that assertiveness, and there's lots of research literature from from nursing students to support this. If you train people to become assertive, to make that I statement, they feel much more connected to their profession. They feel like much better professionals, and they're much less likely to burn out. So for our model, individualized, focused on developing a sense of self in the field to prevent burnout. In addition to our model, we do from the behavioral activation literature a lot of helping people develop what we call wellness plans, which are behavioral activation plans to prevent burnout. But then when the person's burnt out, we have this whole restorative supervision model that we flip into, which is how to turn around, conceptualize the burnout, and how to then make sure that this person recovers from the burnout. And the field owes that to that person, right? The supervisor owes it to that person to help because you didn't burn out in a vacuum. Now, there's some aversives on a job that are intrinsic to the job and you just can't get rid of them. But teaching them how to kind of separate from that, providing other reinforcement. I mean, you work at a residential, if you work, I used to work in prison, and this was about, I spent about a year and a half working in prison. Violence occurred. You can't just separate violence from the job. You are working with prisoners. But the idea here is how do you use that to desensitize them a little bit to that, but also build a community around them where that's not the most important thing, right? And how do you conceptualize this person that's experiencing burnout? With that, I want to flip it a little bit to Mike, who's co-wrote this book with me, to see if he's got stuff he wants to add on restorative supervision in that context, just to make sure I hit the major points. Mike, you got a second?
Yeah. Just coming off of some of Joe's really good points is that you want to look at self-care as well, because you want to make sure that the supervisor is, if they're going to provide effective supervision, they need to take care of themselves, and that's important as well. But they can also utilize that in their supervision for them and their trainee or supervisee or consultee. We separate those terms out, but the idea is that are they engaging in something like mindfulness, for example, for themselves, and then taking a step back and maybe doing a self-assessment. In the ethics code, they talk about supervisors having, providing feedback and then looking at themselves, at their own supervision. If they're to do that and analyze what they're doing well and maybe not doing as well as they ought to, which can come from different sources, right? It can come from peers, it can come from their supervisors, but also their supervisees or trainees directly, to say, I really wish you would do more, oversight, or give me better and more specific feedback. Or it could be a host of issues, and they have to do a self-assessment. So they're doing a self-functional assessment of their own skills and behaviors. It requires a lot of motivation to do that for a supervisor. If you can train supervisors very well, and hopefully this book will help facilitate that, then they can do a better self-assessment, self-functional assessment, and then look at why they're not providing it and what reinforcers do they need, or instructional or other methods they need to help themselves, including things like mindfulness, relaxation, taking time away, go out and, go swimming, or whatever you like to do, go for a hike, go for a walk, but take yourself away from it, then come back into it. This can help tremendously, because there's so much stress in a lot of agencies, and Joe and I've both been in practice and doing this for many years, is that it's all about being in there and providing those service hours. And some agencies overemphasize, billable hours. They think that it's a law firm or something. And we're not a law firm. Yeah, and it runs. I've been in places where that's the expectation. You bill for every 5 minutes of what you do. It's what lawyers do. We're not there. That's not what we should be doing if we really have compassion about our work and the people that we're there to take care of and provide help to. And so we have to take care of ourselves. We have to, have the right focus. So sometimes refocusing, and maybe you need to take a little time off for yourself to have a little retreat. Sometimes organizations will have retreats to do that, which can help. I've seen some of them work well, and then refocus your energy, and then when you come back, you can be more effective. You might have better strategies, come up with a plan, using some OBM strategies in that regard. We have some of, we talk about Aubrey Daniels and a few others who in that area talk about what you can do to improve the services you're providing and the supervision that you're providing. And then if you can help yourself, then you are in a better place to assist your supervisee with this burnout, because we're seeing huge turnover rates in the field right now. And those are just the actual factual data. It's going somewhere in the vicinity of 40% burnout, and people leaving the field after a couple of or so years. Reading some of the posts that I see online from people in the field, there's all kinds of different issues that they raise. Why, they're being told you got to do these hours, or you're gone, or we're not going to pay you for these hours, or you got to do all these bill, not take care of your clients, take care of your clients, take care of your clients, but bill. It's all about the bottom line. Now, business is important to survive, but that can't be everything. You got to do it for the right reasons. And so that's where I'm having a problem. Oop, something just kind of went out on me there. So that's really, I think, where we are with this, and why you need to work on that. As Joe said, something like behavioral activation for the depression, for the anxiety, those can help a great deal as well in regard to helping with this burnout issue, and what we think will help with regard to a restorative approach. So those are just some of my additional thoughts and comments on what we provide and bring to this and bring to the table on that regard. That can be helpful, and that maybe others are not doing, or maybe some are, but I don't know how much of this is going on. But those are some of the key features of it.
And I think Mike brings up a really good point about using OBM strategies and taking a community approach to it. This is your work environment, and you really do want to make this work environment an environment that people feel they're thriving in. I like to go a little further, though. There is this myth that behavior analysts burn out at a higher rate of others. And if you look at special ed teachers, that's the case. There's a 22% burnout rate for special ed teachers, and this is a lot higher. But if you go into mental health and you look at mental health, clinical social workers are 48%, psychologists are 50% burnout rate. There is a high burnout rate in the professions that deal with things for mental health. Now, the problem with behavior analysts that I've seen over the years is behavior analysis subscribed heavily, at least in this generation, to an acquisition model of supervision, which is great for people in a sensory stage or an early verbal stage.
What is acquisition? You said acquisition
Getting
supervision.
skills. Getting skills of supervision is almost like a trainer kind of model. They've kind of, and that's early stuff that you do, it's skill based and skill based learning, right? That's acquisition. There is a point where people stop being at the acquisition level. They get into an advanced verbal stage with the material. And now it's problem solving. Now it's a maintenance level supervision. It's how do you apply that to a difficult case? How do you take those skills that you've learned and use them in this unique case with these unique features? And what happens, there's all these licensing laws that insist on acquisition supervision. So you get your BCBA and then they let you go, right? And now you're alone in a world and no one's doing this maintenance supervision, and few people are doing restorative supervision once you've burned out. So I think that when we let the cart go, we got to recognize it can only go so far before the laws of physics, the punishment density starts to accumulate, and then people start to burn out. And that's where they're going to need the restorative supervision. We can buy extra time by helping them problem solve, moving into troubleshooting programs in this maintenance level supervision. This also creating a supportive, caring environment. You're not the solo BC out there that's consulting on a case where no one cares, right? Especially in adults, there's a lot of BCBA. I have this thing. I walk into the group home or I walk into the residential. No one cares if I'm there. No one listens to me. And that, right. And I think that that's where we have to start to really say, no. We as a field messed up. We as a field should continue ongoing supervision with people, even after they got their BCBA. We should have them accruing supervision hours every year to make sure that they are healthy. And it's this idea of not that the supervisor is your therapist, but the supervisor is to keep a healthy work environment, to help you build conceptual skills, to help you apply those skills to individualized clients, that maintenance level supervision. And if you start to burn out, to be there to help you with the job related burnout issues, not your home related burnout issues. They're not your therapist, but to really focus in on how do we re-excite you about the job. And then one of the nice things about our book is we talk about more molar concepts like tone of the supervision, like hope in supervision, right? What is the BCBA's hopes, right? And we talk about these phenomena in a more molar behavior analytics sense, not just a moment to moment issue, but what is their cumulative reinforcement history told them? What are they in the situation when someone says, I hope, what does that mean? And these are kind of things that we bring in, how to encourage that hope and how to encourage that enthusiasm. We spent like 5-6 paragraphs in the book just talking about enthusiasm. And so that becomes a point that we really, how do we keep people enthusiastic? Not curbing their enthusiasm. That was a good show, but that's not where we're going.
No.
And I want to actually piggyback off of what you said because you gave a lot of information. And I want to just speak to people who are interested in working in adult services. Like I said, those people that are eager to be in the field. Everything you mentioned is a priority because what makes us different from working with early learners, and children. Working with adult services, it's an interdisciplinary team where it's not you just working with that individual supported. You're working with their family. Then if they have a residential provider, you work with the residential provider. Outside of the residential provider, you're working with the case manager. Outside of the case manager, you're working with, so it's like a whole team you're constantly ebbing and flowing with. And if you don't have the mental capacity or the soft skills to navigate the ebb and flow of the um, interdisciplinary team framework, you're going to get burnt out because I've noticed that with a lot of BCBAs, and this is something that was kind of instilled in me. This is your plan. You need to get everybody to do your plan. You need to develop reinforcers, do whatever you can to get everybody to do your plan. But when it comes to adult services, it doesn't work like that. You have to see what resources are available, what can they do, what repertoires they do have, and then you work from there. Because if you sit there and put all your energy in trying to force everybody to do your plan, you're going to get burnt out. And then on top of that, when it comes to adult services too, the community is small. Specifically, when you work in counties and cities, people talk. So if you develop this reputation for being an authoritative approach, trying to demand everybody to do things your way, people aren't going to refer cases to you because they're going to like, hey, when we worked with Shonda, she came off a little too strong. So it's just one of those things where it's good that, like you said, when it comes to supervision, I'm not hyper focused on just making sure you know the 6th edition task list or wherever you are at the season, the 7th edition task list, who knows how far this video is going to go in the ethics, but you also need to know that balance of that wellness and then having that gaining the skills of discernment of, do I feel off? And if I do feel off, do I need to kind of separate myself for a little bit? Do I need a mental health day to recharge? And also too, when it comes to working with adults, you need a network. So yes, you might have your supervisor, and yes, you might have your colleague, but it's always good to find other BCBAs. And the reason why, because everybody has a gift to help enhance your skill set. So by you having that network, constantly branching out, you can get that additional feedback. Hey, Shonda, you're coming off a little too strong. Maybe you need to take a day off, or hey, maybe listen to this CEU, or hey, listen to Joseph and Mike's, they got a new book out, things like that. Because although you have your supervisor and your colleagues, you got to understand they only know so much. I'm not tearing them down in any capacity, but they only know so much. But when you broaden your network, it's like you're kind of gaining different skill sets and different ideas on how to constantly navigate. Because working with adults, not only is it the interdisciplinary team approach, but you also have the high intensity behaviors that come with working with adults. Sure. You have individuals that are jumping out of cars. I mean, you got low intensity, high intensity. Low intensity, you might have somebody that might have tics, verbal aggression. It's affecting their employment, so you're providing support. And you might have the most extreme, where every day this person's trying to take their life. So it's one of those things where you need to gain that skill set of making sure you have a supervisor that utilizes restorative supervision. And if they don't, it's okay, because we might not get to that point yet. You, as developing your clinician skills, you put that in your toolbox. Let me gain the skill set of restorative supervision, so when I start to supervise others, I can make sure I instill them, because it's so much more than just.
That's right. Yeah, I did tons of kind of supervision for not only behavior analysts, but also for psychologists. I had a staff of psychologists and psychology interns in adult services, and adult residential and community based, and kind of congregate care based. And I did that for quite a long time. And the approaches that we have to use with adults are indeed very different than when you're talking about with young children, because I worked all the way down into early ages, early intervention work, whole different area, a whole different set of approaches that we use. I'm not there doing discrete trial or even specific, very intensive behavioral intervention with an adult, because we do have an adult and we want to um, give them the benefit of any doubt and treat them respectfully and like adults. I've worked with in organizations where the management and administrators were appalled at the idea that you would let an adult with a developmental disability enter into a personal, intimate relationship with someone. And I always said, that's their right. You can't stop that. And I would tell the top administrator, I don't care who they are, you can't deny this person of that right. And if they wanted to have a friend over, I don't care if it was the same sex or different sex, that's their business, not mine. They want to have them over and go in their bedroom, they're adults, unless there's some issues or something that we know of, medical or health, then let them do it. You and I have the right to do that. Why shouldn't they? I was a very strong advocate for that all the way along. And then talk about ableism. Administrators are sometimes the worst violators of that, the worst. And I've dealt with a lot over the years, believe me, but they're afraid of lawsuits. I had an intern who did a sexuality training for our adults that we provided support for. And the administrators were like, I don't know. I don't know if we can do this. I'm like, what do you mean? Why not? And then I was the clinical director, right? And then we had this was with Devereaux, Joe. And anyway, and then the parents were afraid. Oh, if you teach my child about sex, you're going to turn them into sex fiends, and all they want to have is sex all the time, you know. So I just assured them and met with them and the intern and said, look, this is what we're training them on. It's very basic stuff, like basic hygiene, body parts, self-care. We brought in Planned Parenthood. Have you ever worked with Planned Parenthood? They were fantastic. They were they were great. They would come in at no charge, and they would put the staff through the training. Me and my staff, and they put us through the training that they would give the individuals, and it was incredible. And are you there? I didn't lose you. And so I hope. And then the parents said, I said, give this a chance. And you know what? After we started to see their family member progressing and learning about social interactions, how to speak to somebody they want to have a relationship with, because they have no idea how to do it. No one ever taught them, because they thought, oh, this person has a developmental disability. We should hide them away in the corner. They shouldn't be out there. No, just the opposite. And the parents came back to me afterwards and said, oh my God, I never saw this before. They're doing great. They understand how to have relationship. They're being more respectful to others now. They know how to interact and socialize and start a conversation. They know how to engage in a personal or more intimate relationship. And in fact, it made them less sexual, not more. And the parents acknowledged that. And it was a fantastic program. I told my student there that you have to publish this thing. This was her dissertation she did with me. And it was a fantastic program. And it really worked well because it respected them as human beings and not pigeonholing them and saying, oh, because they have a quote disability, you can't do this. No. Did the same thing.
I just want to say one thing, and it's tying into all of this. And Joe, I know you got something to say.
Yes, he does.
I know you do, but I just want to say what I love about the restorative supervision. You're focusing on that balance of monitoring your wellness, because something I noticed too, as clinicians, we can end up on autopilot, where you get to a certain skill set where you know your job well enough, where you're giving generic answers and generic responses, and you're kind of looping everybody in one box. I've been through this before. This is what we need to do. Put this rights restriction in place. Do this, do that, do this. And you kind of fall into appeasing what the team wants as opposed to what the individual wants. And people fail to realize, when you support the adult population, from my experience, the bulk of the reason why our individuals have the most high intensity behaviors due to the restrictions,
Right.
due
Right.
to just like the simple stuff of saying
Hmm.
you can't date. So we're going to deny you the right of a cell phone, deny you the right to go out to this store because we know men are going to, and you deny, not realizing that you're causing more harm than good.
You
So
are.
by you having that restorative supervision approach of look, it looks like you're on
Yeah.
autopilot is like I
Yeah.
said, you're just kind of, you're not really considering the cases in front of you. You're kind of just
No.
pigeonholing
But what you,
everything based on your
right.
experience. But by you actually gaining, stepping away from autopilot, you truly can look at the case, look at the ecological factors, look at the person's
Hmm.
learning history, and really give a true sound clinical decision.
Yeah.
Because don't get me wrong, some of our individuals need some of those restrictions just due to safety. Some of our individuals, sadly,
Hmm.
hey, as a team and your guardian, we have to put these restrictions in place where you can't
Yeah.
have a phone, can't
And
do this, just due to certain limitations. But then you have some individuals who do have the skill set where you can teach them and they can learn. But
that's
the
right.
team, sadly, something I've learned within adult
Mm,
services,
mm,
hopefully people are hearing this and
yeah.
are
Yeah.
willing to break the mold. When you're in those rooms, advocate. Okay, yes, we're putting this rights restriction, but let's focus on fading this and teach the person the skills they need so they don't be vulnerable. Like you brought up sexuality. I had a young lady who was interested in sex, engaged in masturbation, all those things. And the mom is like, I don't know where she got this from. Maybe it's the staff she's working with. Let's get rid of some of the staff in the house. I think it's them. I told her, you got to understand, yes, your mom and you're making all these decisions, but you have to understand your daughter is vulnerable. So if we don't teach her the skills when it comes to her
Yeah.
sexuality, she
Absolutely.
might run across the wrong person who may take advantage of her. So we need to at least teach this young lady the skills
That's right.
of saying yes, saying no. I feel uncomfortable. I need to leave, as opposed to just
Hmm.
putting up this brick wall because mom, the reality is, I'm just going to keep it real, you may pass soon. So if you continue to have all this control as the guardian, a state, if family doesn't step up to the plate, state guardianship is going to come in. So you really aren't going to have control at that point. So at least if anything does happen to you, at least your daughter knows the basics so she won't be vulnerable. You can
That's
at
right.
least be at
Yeah.
peace. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to add that
And
tidbit.
yeah, definitely. We found that regardless of so-called disability and all of that sort of thing, whatever diagnosis, and so it didn't matter. They all were able to learn these skills. And my intern went in there saying, "Yep, I can teach it. They can learn it." And she demonstrated that they can learn it. And she just disregarded all these different saying, "Oh, they're severely disabled. They can't learn that." It turned out to be totally untrue, totally. And she just went in with the mindset that they can learn it. And so it was very impressed. I was very impressed with her. Frankly, it was quite a program that she put together. But and then did a lot with getting assaulted for going into Planned Parenthood office herself, as you can imagine. A woman going
Yeah.
into Planned Parenthood, that was also not a safe thing to do, but she went in because she was there for a purpose, right? But anyway, so I give her all kind of credit for that. But another group that I worked with and oversaw the clinical and the services for was a group of, we had a group of young adult males, all in their 20s, who were victims of severe abuse and neglect and had reactive attachment disorder. And talk about reactivity, just extreme behaviors like assault. We had one convicted murderer among them. He was a convicted murderer. And the state sent the person to us and said, just lock them away and don't let them go in the community because they're going to kill people. And we didn't listen. We did just the opposite, um, and had that person out in a job, in a short period of time. We had an individual who had what the psychiatrist said it was catatonic schizophrenia because his abuse was so bad. And every time you push on the person or re-expose them to what caused the problem. Like oftentimes it's a parent that neglected them. You try to re-expose them to that, or re-expose them to being separated from the world. What you're doing is re-traumatizing the person every
Mm.
time. Okay, so they talk about the quote now trauma informed care. No, it's trauma treatment, not trauma informed care. It's trauma treatment. That's a better term for it, and much better fitting with our behavioral concepts. What we did some groundbreaking work that we published on this with my co-developers, because I didn't come up with it myself. There were people who were already there doing this, uh, and we evolved it. Uh, you know what? The first thing is that you have to reestablish the attachment with someone, and we allowed no behavior plans for them. That's the worst thing you could do. Why re-traumatize the person? They've had enough of that in their lives. And all it did was traumatize them. And we found having no behavior plan actually was very effective. So sometimes behavior analysts, as you say, Shauna, you have to turn back and rethink it. And sometimes you have to just step back and take other approaches. And you have to think out of the box with this population. But we got them all to be able to come back. This person that was so-called catatonic schizophrenia, using our approach, he reattached with staff, and then he was able to interact, smile, and laugh again. Went out into the community and engaged. It was very effective, and and I don't know what the psychiatrist thought, but obviously it was not catatonic schizophrenia. It was because he was traumatized, and that was the real issue.
Right.
So
So I'd like to come back just to clean up a couple things first. Is we were talking earlier and we talked about my plan. It should never be my plan. It should always be our plan. And that collaborative focus says that this is a person I respect and I'm going to take their input. The second end of that I wanted to pick up on is not every system is the same. When I worked in prison, there's actually a law that says prisoners can't have sex with each other. So we were expected to turn that in. If you found out two prisoners had a relationship, because they're wards of the state. So the idea
yeah,
was as wards of the state, and this is just in prison. I don't know if it's anywhere else, but in prison, you were not allowed to have them having sex with each other. If you found out, you were expected to dime them out. So I used to say, "Oh, now I'm the sex police." I used to joke about that. I'm not, don't ask, don't tell was my thing. Don't tell
there
me.
you go.
I don't
There
want
you
to
go.
know.
Mhm.
But with that, you can only do so much advocacy before you realize that that's all stacked against me. But the idea here is that when people are in prison, that's not a system that can do it. There was another thing you had brought up about that just giving rote answers. That is part of burnout. That is what they used to call decision fatigue. You just go to your pat answer. Everything's a
Yeah.
compliance training program. Everything there has got to be done this way. And that's not healthy for our field. There was many years ago, there was an article written about the right to eat too many donuts and take as many naps as you want.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
when you're dealing with adults, you really want to understand that they have a right to make choices. And if they're not choices you agree with, that doesn't matter. They have a right, unless there's a danger to themselves, to
Mhm,
make
mhm.
choices and to fail from their choices. I think that when we can accept that, we move away from that ableist position. Now, there's some cautions I have about people advocating against ableism, but for the most part, we want to be able to respect the decisions of our clients. They have a right to make choices. They have a right to be wrong, right? And we need to accept that. And that I was talking to Mike before we got on a little bit about because I think he worked with Jennifer McCumbus, but I'm not sure he did or didn't.
Yeah, she
You
worked with
did.
me down in Florida.
I thought she did. I
She
kept
was
saying
down there in
I'm
Florida.
pretty
Yeah,
sure she
I
worked
know
with
she
Mike.
would. Yeah, but it used
She
to be know where her house. I used to go over to her house and yeah, all that. But yeah,
she wrote two very good articles on behavior analysis and ableism. They were in Journal of Behavior Analysis and Practice, which is a journal out there from one of those groups. But anyway, it's a technical journal. I guess it's a technical journal. that's out there. She did 2 articles. They might have been 2024, might have been 2025,
Mm.
where they put out specific guidelines for behavior analysts to turn around and to make sure that they're not engaged in ableist practices. Now, there are some of the advocacy groups with ableism, and she points it out as well in her articles, where, they're saying people have a right to learn a skill or not learn a skill. And you have to take that with a grain of salt. Yes, to some degree, they have a right to learn a skill or not learn a skill, but we have compulsory education with kids for the reason that some things are long-term choices and they impact society, and a person not being able to see it in the minute is a problem. And I think that's what Matt Tinkani does with his research on assent and yes and no. When he's doing that kind of research, I think that like falls into it. And I get worried when I hear advocates say, the other side of it, that we should assume everyone's competent, because that really shifts the argument. I mean, we take data to find out if they really are competent to do that, but that shifts the argument from they can't do it to they choose not to do it. And there are a lot of us in this field that have been here a long time. Mike knows this true, that such arguments led to the institutionalization, which was a great thing for a lot of people and horrible for some. They became homeless, they lived on the street. And the idea is we don't need that line of services, which, by the way, is pretty expensive anymore. So you start hearing that they choose not to do it, and you start getting a little scared because you start saying, is this a move? Because we know lots of budget cuts are coming. Is this a move to kick people off of their assistance? It's they choose not to. And if they choose not to, why should I be giving them money? Right, as a taxpayer, if they choose not to. And so you have to have this idea. There literally are some people that can't do it. And so you have to pull back for a minute and say, where is this philosophy going? And is it eugenics? Right? Are we covering eugenics here, where we're going to kick out all the kids with disabilities and say, oh, they're just choosing not to speak, rather than they can't speak? They don't have the words. So habilitation to a point, skills training, and Jennifer McCumbus points this out in her article on guidelines, is not ableism. Nobody went to their fourth grade teacher and says, I choose not to learn math, right? You can't, we suspect that that's a long term, the person can't make those decisions of what the job market's going to look like at 21. And hopefully, education itself has some basis in protecting our democracy. So society makes a decision of compulsory education.
Mm-hmm.
So I get a little concerned about that. But so you always want to see what's the extreme versions of your position. But other than that, people should have a right to make choices, and they should definitely make choices that I disagree with, because not everybody's me, right? And that's something we have to grow and become aware of, that just because someone doesn't want to do what you want them to do doesn't mean that we have to jump in and run a
Right.
response
And
cost.
this is the whole assent argument. This ties right into the assent argument that's now a bit controversial in the field,
Mhm.
right? You know, should the individual have their right to decide not to do something that they don't
Well,
want to do?
and think about it. Girls should have a right to say no for sexuality, but there are some people that go the complete opposite and say
Mm-hmm.
everything on a date should be assent oriented, and that they should agree up front. And then there are people that say, well, that kills the spontaneity in the sex. And a lot of both genders say that kills the spontaneity. So you got to watch, are we really focused on this? 90% of the people, if you're married, the best of the partners always talk about, yeah, you want to do it now or not? I mean, it's not like there is an assent process, but there's got to be a way to kind of hear all voices on this, because this is going to have a large impact in a broader societal sense than just autism services, than just children with autism. And that's some of the things when I met with Matt, when he was doing a workshop and I happened to be in it. And I said, you got to think about this thing in broader terms. What is it, the standard that we're setting, as far as society. And I agree that I think everybody should agree and have things planned out and discuss things and fully know what they're getting into. I mean, I just talked about sex, but if you're getting sex for the first time, there's a lot of relational issues that need to be discussed before you kind of jump into that. Although, people from the free love generation might all disagree with me completely, but there are a lot of issues that are long term, and people are afraid and they're scared of those issues. And I think talking about it is one way of overcoming those fears. Discussing it. I don't know. That's just my thoughts on the matter as I ponder on.
Oh no, you're saying a lot of good points. We do got 10 minutes left, and I wanted to end our discussion with what are your thoughts on the future of supervision in adult services? If you could redesign behavior analytics supervision specifically for adult services over the next decade,
we could be
what
here all day on
no,
that
you got 10 minutes left, 10 minutes. What
topic.
core systematic, but we do have a part two. In case you guys don't know, we got a part two coming up. So if you do feel like, hey, Shonda, we got more, we can pause
Okay.
We
it.
always have more. Have us back.
Yes.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
core systematic changes would you make to prepare clinicians to address aging, co occurring mental health conditions, trauma, community integration, and long term quality of life outcomes?
So I think quality of life should always be our most important focus. If we're doing an intervention, how does it help someone's quality of life? I also talked about, having an R plan perspective, which means I might have strategies, but I always let the team develop the specific tactics when I'm writing a treatment plan. There are many ways to skin a cat, and I want to go with what they can do. And a big part of the team is the person. I'd say 80% of the team is the person there that these services are going to affect them as an adult, right? Would you like to work towards this? Is this something you see as important? This is my strategy. How do you think we can achieve this? Right. And when I talk about young kids, I mean, I often say I don't care whether or not they want to make attention contingent on alternative behavior. If they want to satiate the attention up front by just having non-contingent attention. I got no stock in that game. What's most effective for this teacher and what's this client feel like is going to be the best for them. So that's the way I kind of look at these things. If you pull back and you recognize, you get an idea of function, that's what you're paid for your bucks, right? And then you turn around and you let them develop tactics, as long as the tactics don't violate your strategy, then you got to kind of point that out, right? Um, Go with what they can come up with. Not everything's a point system. Not everything's a level system in this world. And you want to kind of think about that. Um, but also you want to think about how do they get their basic needs met? How can they use that functional communication? And that's really important. So I agree with McCumbus there that you have to be concerned when advocates are saying they don't want to have them learn a skill, and that's ableism. Now, she made excellent guidelines, and a lot of those guidelines, Mike and I wrote a lot of stuff about history of behavior analysis in the prison setting and in criminal justice. And we got thrown out of criminal justice and behavior analysis, and we were thrown out rightfully so. Not just it wasn't always our fault, but it was, the courts turned around and said, you won't police your own. These people have these basic rights to these things. And so Mike and I, when we did a lot of editorials about the importance of licensing back in 2004, 2005, these were things we kind of highlighted. 2004 to 2007, we spent a lot of time on this idea of licensing and the reason for licensing. And one of them is community protection, protection from us, right, as behavior analysts, because we don't police ourselves well. And history has shown that. And I think Jennifer McCumbis points out a very similar line of arguments in developmental disability care, in people with developmental disabilities. She points to those kinds of things. But I talked a little bit before, there was actually a psychiatrist in the prison system, and they were doing what they call scintillate experiments. It's a drug they inject you with if you were out of line. They would inject you with this drug, and you'd spend 10 minutes with the simulation of drowning. Right. And that was a punishment procedure. who the hell wants to feel like they're drowning for 10 minutes? I mean,
Mm.
it's not, I mean, that to me was torture and cruel and unusual. That was a behavior modification practice in the
That's right.
70s, right? And it
Yeah.
wasn't behavior analysts because we don't inject people and we certainly don't prescribe things,
Right.
but that was a psychiatrist saying this was behavior mod. And so
And
that's
well, it is a form of behavior modification, which is why we moved away from that term. And we had to, yes.
right,
Right.
but the blind slapping of punishment contingencies, I used to
Yeah.
call
Oh
it.
my goodness. Yeah.
Right,
So is waterboarding. Waterboarding behavior modification too.
yeah, but yeah, again, it rises past that level of acceptable practice, and that's what you want to look at. And I think that that stuff. When we think about quality of care, we need to start thinking. Judy Flavel, in a book that was edited by Saul Axelrod in the '80s, right? She did a thing where she actually said, um, a least restrictive environment is an environment people prefer to live in, right? And it's in that article that she has. And that's one of the things when you go out there and you do your checklist on group homes and on residential treatments. We actually have a checklist like that in our book. You want to think about, is this is an environment this person would actively choose to live in, right?
Mm.
Because that's respecting a person, right? You don't want people to, well, unless they're in prison, they don't have a right to anything like that. But you know what I'm saying? They should. That's the court thing. But the idea is they're in prison and somebody took away their rights. And a lot of the families that were victimized would tell you, I don't care what they get. They
Yeah.
belong
Yeah.
in there. But you want to think about it. 1993 was a very important year. That was the first year more people with mental illness were in prisons than were in institutional care. And that was a movement of deinstitutionalization. We
That's
didn't
right.
deinstitutionalize them. We changed their friggin' institution. They just went from uh, custodial care and institutions to prison. And that wasn't fair to do to the consumers. That was a nasty thing to do to consumers. And that's because we got ahead of ourselves
Right.
with
Well,
uh, good, good intentions paved the road to hell, they say. It's a
right.
very
But
Christian
we're
concept.
seeing a potential
Yeah.
reversal of that now, currently,
Which is
to
not
go
as good
back,
either.
which is not going to be good. And the shutting down of Olmstead at the federal court level that might go through again the Supreme Court to see if they'll uphold Olmstead, which will be devastating to community-based services in our field. It really
Well,
will be.
what's devastating is the DOJ memo that says
Yeah.
the
Well, there's
federal
that.
government is not responsible for
Yeah.
community-based care.
Well,
It is only responsible for institutional care. And that
yep.
DOJ memo came out, and I know
Yep.
several advocacy groups that got very concerned about
Oh,
that.
yeah. Oh, yes.
And I know a lot of behavior analysts that are very concerned about that because if rehabilitation's off the table, that ends a lot of these
Yep.
home-based autism
Yeah. I
cases.
mean, I
They won't
worked
be paid.
for years. I worked in residential, in adult residential, and for many years, and all funded through the federal government. If they shut that down, we don't know what's going to happen to these folks. You
Yeah.
know, um,
Ooh.
yeah, and that's a scary thing, very scary thing. But I don't think behavior analysis. Behavior analysis. There's a little secret here. If I have a minute or two, and sorry to cut you off,
Got
Joe,
2 more minutes.
is really that this field, in terms of Joe and I were around and licensed psychologists and doing this behavioral work decades before there was ever such a thing as a BACB. When that came around, we said, "What the heck is that?" And we thought, yeah, it's probably a good idea. And we both became certified, but we were licensed psychologists, or behavioral psychologists for many, many years before that. I've been a licensed psychologist for 40 years. Behavior analysis, when you look at the actual focus and emphasis of it, you look at one of the premier current books, the Cooper Herod Hero book, and you look at the ethics code, and you look at the task list, which is now the test content outline. What's it geared to? Specifically, it's geared to and designed for, even though they don't tell you this, but I have inside information here, I won't say where, that it is designed for treatment of children and adolescents, young children and adolescents with autism, specifically, and other developmental disabilities. That's what it's all about. Behavior analysis certification was never developed to work with adults with developmental disabilities. It was not. It's just a plain fact. And we have to invent it. We have to invent it now, because if we don't, no one else will.
Yeah, and
So
it's not that the principles don't work. I mean, I get this too when I get up people that come in for sort of like they come in for like all different kinds of care. Like I treat anxiety kids, you know, again, I supervise people treating kids with PTSD. I supervise people treating people that have weight issues and those kinds of things. And you know, again, binging and purging. So
yeah,
with behavior analysis and therapy partners, we work with a broad base panic disorder that, you know, again, there are old studies done on this, but
Mm.
post BCBA, everything went to childhood autism. And that was
yeah,
not a
yeah,
study that did that. And it was good and it was bad. It took us at fields like that we were actually very good at. We just stopped developing technology in it.
yeah, yeah.
I always point out to people Richard Stewart's work with weight, and it became Weight Watchers. And today,
Oh,
the
wow.
only people that have published outcome data over and over again, massive amounts of outcome data on weight reduction, have been Weight Watchers. The only people
Oh,
that
wow.
uh, publish data on does this program work on a regular basis for people of different racial minority groups is Weight Watchers, right?
Oh,
And when you're
wow.
talking about the big commercial programs, this is what you got, and that
Yeah.
was Stewart's program.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
Substance abuse, community reinforcement approaches, which is the 12-step program, basically. I
yeah,
mean, they all fits together, and that's effective.
yeah, it was that whole community reinforcement kind
Community
of model.
reinforcement, yeah.
Yeah, and
So
I
For
think
I
that
substance
am
abuse.
gonna.
I was going to say
So
one
Joe,
last thing about Weight
okay.
Watchers is recognizing also that Weight Watchers does good is letting the client control it. And now you're seeing a much
Mm,
more focused movement on not everybody's supposed to have the same body image. Not everybody's supposed to have the
mm,
same body. It's like the poodles took over the world for guys like me that are kind of heavy. And we say, wait a minute, I'm never going to be a poodle. You know what I'm saying? And there's an
mm,
acceptance of that, and that's where you get the act kind of stuff coming in. There's a whole Emily Sandos wrote a whole book with Kelly Wilson, I believe, if my
Hmm,
memory's serving me correct,
hmm.
on act for body image. And a lot of that is accepting that we're not all poodles, right? A lot of that is accepting that maybe these stigmas are wrong. And in the old days, when we did weight stuff, we used to say, hey, go to like your local YMCA and look at the older people from your ethnic background. Look at how their bodies are built because that's the way your body probably should age. And don't kill yourself because that's where you should
mm,
go. Now, with weight issues, we see that women decline in weight issues as they get older past 35. Men's issues increase post 35, right?
mm.
You see more steroid abuse, you see more things along that line. And that's something we could actually make a real indent on as behavior analysts. Teach them to discriminate their own hunger cues, provide a community where they can discuss their weight and feel like they're getting sufficient reinforcement, like Weight Watchers does, hold them accountable and teach them self-control things, but at the same time recognizing not everybody's a poodle, right? And
Yes,
just
yes,
accepting that. Does that make
yes.
sense?
Oh, that makes a whole lot of sense. I love how we started off with discussing supervision and being poodles and Weight Watchers and discrimination training. I love it. I love it. But with that being said, before we wrap up, you name drop someone who did an article on ableism. I want to find it and put it in the comment. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah,
put it
that
in
was
the.
Jennifer McCombus. She
McComas,
actually
yeah.
did two
McComas, yeah.
articles back to back on ableism. They appeared in Behavior Analysis and Practice. I think they were 2024. They could be 2025. My memory is on the exact date. You can always find, I'll put you within a 3-year period. But I will
Okay.
never, but I,
Oh,
you know,
no
again, it gets
worries. 'Cause I think that would be a great resource for all my
Yeah.
listeners
oh,
because I'm always talking about
This
ableism,
is
but to actually find a peer review article on
ableism
it,
and
you're gonna learn a lot.
applied behavior analysis. A beginner's guide, McComas, 2025.
oh, it was
Okay,
2025.
thank
See, I was
you.
right.
Sounds
And
good.
it's in
And
behavior
for those,
analysis and practice.
That's what I said, right?
sounds
Didn't
good.
I?
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
And for
right.
Yeah.
those of you who
Now
are
she
wrapping
put
up with us,
skylines in there for making sure. Now this is critical. Just to say
so
one
Joe,
last
I'm
thing.
sorry to
Oh
cut you
no,
off.
I was just going to say it's critical for supervisors to be able to use these kinds of things with their supervisees. But then I'm done.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Joe. And for those of you who are watching, we are going to have a part 2. Please follow me on social media. I do Facebook, I do LinkedIn, I even have a TikTok, and you guys will see any videos that are coming up. And for those of you who are just now joining us, we have the authors Joseph Catali, Michael Weinberg, Timothy Templin, and Valerie Pascali. I probably pronounced her name wrong. Valerie Pascal, and they all are the authors of the upcoming book, Comprehensive Behavior Analytic Supervision. So stay tuned for part 2. All right, thank you guys.
I know.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Are we supposed to be on part 2, or are they supposed to, is that
So give me 1 second because my